contributions have been received as well. The idea, as well as art. The idea for the Aleph Review was to provide a space where young emerging talent could be published alongside more established and renowned talent. And I believe we've achieved the goal so far. We are doing this event today in collaboration with the Tawfiq Rafat Foundation. The Aleph and the Tawfiq Rafat Foundation has had a long relationship. Our first issue was actually dedicated to the late poet Tawfiq Rafat, and the Tawfiq Rafat Foundation is in honor of his memory to revive poetry and literature amongst the youth of Pakistan. Tawfiq Rafat was heralded as the father of the Pakistani idiom in modern English literature and poetry specifically. There's a very riveting and very compelling essay in the first issue of the Aleph Review that describes his entire process and what he believed was the Pakistani idiom and why you need to use your own heritage and your culture when you write about your culture. Then we would like to thank Mr. Rashid Rahman for hosting us today in this lovely space. The Research and Publication Center is, in his vision, a meeting point where ideas can be openly exchanged between people, not just political, but cultural, literature, and just a place where people, young and old, can come together and have a free exchange of ideas. There's also a monthly online journal called the Pakistan Online Review that comes out in this space. Sorry? Monthly, yes. That comes out with literature and poetry. So the effort behind all three entities in hosting this today is that we're all invested in promoting literature in Pakistan in all its form, culture in Pakistan in all its form, and trying to get this local culture and local literature to be visible internationally as well. So now I'm going to hand it over to Mehwish Amin.
Actually, we're going to show a short film.
Okay, we're going to start with a short film, and then I'll hand it over to Mehwish Amin, who will be conducting today's event. Thank you.
Just a word about the film.
Yes.
You can tell them about what exactly the film is about and how it's
This is a short film, as sort of a little review. Sorry. This is a short film about the book. So the key things, it was made by three parents. Zaman, which is seated by his brother, Zaman Arwana, made a video and he got all the pieces together and directed it. The music was provided by a former student who is Makal Hassan. And one of my acting friends, since I write plays, he's a classical Shakespearean actor, he did the voiceover. So it was all put together, so with the Scotch tape, but I think it's nice. See that.
Can you see all of it?
I got this novel about 6 days ago, and I read it through, and I really enjoyed reading it. And I met Anita for the first time yesterday, and a few questions obviously came to my mind while I was reading the book. But since most of you haven't read it, I'm just going to ask her first to give a brief introduction about herself, and then I really want to know when you started writing this novel. And actually I'm very keen to know because it starts in 1919 and it goes on till 1964, and it sort of envelops a lot of things in those, obviously publishing is one of them, but lots of other things, and the life of a family basically inside the old city, and the obsession of a mother, Khurshid, who is so moved by a prediction by a peer that her son Awais will do great things, that she even changes her name. Her name was Amrao and she changes it to Khurshid. And she just basically puts her whole life into this obsession of hers, and she wants it. And strangely enough, I don't want to give the story away, but towards the end you find out that this guy Awais has done something great. He has, in a very quiet way, but she's still not satisfied, and she feels that the greatness that should have been due to him and that he was due, he is not achieved. And I think the readers find that he, on the other hand, has. So anyway, it's a very long, and it kind of meanders through many topics, many people of the family. It goes to Pune, it goes to Delhi, it touches various parts of the partition and afterwards, and it's really quite a tour de force. And I wanted to ask her how did she think of this plot? I mean, why did she know anybody in the old city? Did a peer ever sort of tell something to somebody that became an obsession? What is behind this? And also I want to ask her, what was the most difficult thing that she had to face while writing this novel? So this is the first novel, right? So I'll hand it over to her, so you tell us something about yourself, your novel. I don't know if I'm holding this right, the sound is... Okay. And also, what kind of research did you do for this novel? Did you look up, because the British are there when you want it. Sure. But I'm just giving you a sort of a general thing, and you can go.
First of all, thank you everyone for coming here. So I was born in Lahore. I grew up in County Durham and Wales. And then came back to Lahore when I was 17, and then stayed here for a very long time working in journalism. Fascination with the walled city. My mother grew up in the walled city with her family in Pratigate, and I've always been fascinated by the whole area. So this is not, it's about a Kashmiri family in Pratigate, but it's not my Kashmiri family in Pratigate. This has got nothing to do with my personal history, even though my cousin says, oh, that's one thing you wrote, which is, from the family. But I don't think there's much which is from the family. I love Pune. I love buildings. I've always been fascinated by it. So every time when we were working in the newspapers, I used to have the opportunity to go to these different places. I love architecture. So I was fascinated by these buildings, and the story basically evolved from there. There's no fear in my family, there's none of this. But I was interested also, I think, because I'm very, very interested in history, not just Pakistani history. I write plays now, and most of my plays are historical plays. So I'm very fascinated by all kinds of history. But I think from the Pakistani point of view, what I was really interested in was this is a period in which we were at the cusp of modernity. So the people who were looking back to superstition and fears and that kind of way of life, and people who were looking towards the modern, what they thought was the modern British endeavour. And I was trying to show the tussle between these two things as well as the story goes on.
And I just want to know what, in the process of first, when did you start the novel and how long did it take for you to write it? And then secondly, what was the most difficult aspect of writing this novel?
I wrote the novel years and years ago, and I wrote it very quickly. I write very, very quickly. That's just the training of journalism, because you get used to writing 1,000 words very quickly because you have deadlines. But it took me a very, very long time to find a publisher, the right publisher. And I think that is, I was kept on getting feedback. I kept on getting feedback that we really like the writing, we really like the story, but I think, and I hope I'm not sort of saying, but I think that there was a niche for they want to hear stories about Pakistan, which are sort of fundamental stories about fundamentalism, Islamist stories, and that's not what I was interested in. First of all, that wasn't the period I was covering, but that's just not something I'm interested in. I think other people are doing it, and they're doing it beautifully. Some of these writers are amazing. But that wasn't the story I was telling. But I think a niche was created for Pakistani writers writing in English to tell that kind of story about Pakistan. And that's not the story I wanted to tell.
That's very interesting. And again, I was talking to you earlier, and you said there was one particular part of writing this novel, which was the dialogues, which you found a bit tough to do.
I think writing, I mean, that was fine. Writing was easy. I think the hardest thing to do was the dialogue, because when the dialogue is in Urdu or Punjabi, and you have to translate it into English, I know this is something Uncle Rafiq struggled with all his life, is that you don't want to make it sound like a comic version of English. So say something like, just an expression like, apna ghar samjho. You can't say, think of it as your home in English, sounds weird. So you have to use the English idiomatic thing of make yourself feel at home, but you have to find something which is close enough that it sounds English, but it doesn't sound like a pidgin version of Urdu, because then you're making fun of Urdu. I know that some writers have done that, and I was very wary of that. And I think for me, I do a lot of description. There's a lot of description in the novel. But I was very, very wary of not wanting to write, first of all, a fundamentalist idea of what Pakistan is. And the second thing that I was very wary of is I didn't want to write an exotic novel, where the idea of an exotic Pakistan for white people. I'm hoping, what I really want is a Pakistani readership, a South Asian readership, people who will understand values, who will understand, I mean, of course I would love to have a wider audience as well, but the people who I'm hoping that it will attract is a South Asian audience who understand the systems and the values and the culture that I'm talking about.
I felt that too, definitely. I felt that you weren't writing that niche kind of, the thing that terrorism, even the partition is kind of woven in a way which is not. I mean, you don't only see what maybe the foreigner would want to hear or read about the partition. There are all kinds of elements of it, starting from early, and the politics is brought in a way that it's not at the forefront, it's kind of in the background, but you keep on finding out what's happening in the subcontinent. Okay, so I just want to also ask you, you've got a very large cast of characters. And what I did like was that the novel goes on and on and on, and their births and their deaths, like in life. I mean, there's things happening. It's not like it builds up to that one particular denouement or whatever. It's like things happen and you have to sort of figure out, it's got the pace of life to it, you know. There are deaths in it, there are marriages in it, there are bad marriages in it, there are all kinds of things in it. So was it difficult to sort of have quite a large cast of characters?
In the original version, there were far more people in it. And one of my friends said, he just said, we've got to cut this, we've got to cut that. And so there were things that needed to be cut. I think I tend to write with large casts, so my plays have large casts. That wasn't an issue. The idea of, I wanted the history to be, as we say, weaved into the story, to move from it being a backdrop to being center stage, to being a backdrop to being a center stage, and not, so in that sense it's not a political novel, but it has, because of the period, it's political, and the choice was very...
Okay, this is not working properly, we can't hear. Can we fix this a bit? It's working.
Yeah, I'll just be
Just keep it close to you.
Okay, sorry. So the choices about the dates were very deliberate. So it starts in 1990, which is the year of the Jallianwala massacre, and is also the year that the Indian Muslims joined the Khilafat movement. I was fascinated about what happens. I was fascinated about what happens when you get engaged in politics, and what happens when you refuse to get engaged in politics. So my main character, Vez, is someone who is more like his father. He's leaning toward modernism, he's leaning towards the English, he joins the English service as a spy, and he thinks that politics isn't important. He thinks it's not worth considering. He doesn't engage with it until the day he's forced to engage with it.
Okay, I'd really like you to read like a little bit, since everybody is unfamiliar with your book, I think except for me. I'm lucky enough to read it. So just read from the first half, wherever you choose to.
Okay, I'll start from...
And if you draw into
And yeah.
mic.
Yes, of course.
I'll start from the beginning. So this is right from the beginning. Deep within a city, a crow and a pigeon conversed. No, that's not true. The crow talked and talked, and the pigeon pretended from time to time to listen. Secrets, said the crow, finally clocking on to the fact that the pigeon's attention was light. Great secrets. The least you could do, the pigeon yawned. He'd seen people do it all the time, and had been at great pains to learn this newest of skills, wondering what reaction it would kindle. The crow whispered, so rude. But because above everything else, it was an audience he yearned for. He ignored the pigeon's effrontery and went on. I can tell you, said the crow. Can you tell me, said the pigeon, where to get some bread? The crow sadly shook his head. The pigeon, his pity growing, said, tell me what you are going to say. You don't want to hear. But, said the pigeon, I do. The crow rustled in slow burning pride and said, I can tell you how secrets are broken and how they are made. The crow waited. In his head he could already hear the applause. Is that all? laughed the pigeon. The crow didn't reply. He shed a feather, black, ink dry, because crows have learnt not to cry. What's the point? Even ugly-looking animals are loved by someone, but crows are too strong a reminder of what no one wants to be reminded of, and so are spurned. Down, down the feather swirled, into the depths of the walled city, the inside city of Lahore. Despite the fact, this is March 1928 in the inside city of Lahore in India. Despite the fact that their three-storied house had so many rooms, as a family, the Dars lived, like almost everyone else they knew, in the rooftop courtyard, summer and winter, day and night. Adjoining the courtyard was the narrow kitchen with its mesh door, in its top left-hand corner a gaping hole through which flies and mosquitoes smothered in and out all summer long, and the corridor that led to the family bedrooms, and to the stairs down to the other rooms, the round room, the best room, the guest room, and rooms which had become a dumping ground and which no one ever really entered now. The stairs also led to the front door. Early on this Sunday morning, the whole family, except Darsa, was at home. And so Aves is trying to get out of the house. He hates being in the house under the eye of his mother. So finally he escaped. He escapes outside of the house. He began to run through the narrow streets, swerving past the vegetable and fruit carts, the languorous movement of people for whom time was indefinite. He began to cough, the sound of metal scraping on stone. He couldn't stop. No, he thought, not again. He bent double and waited till it was over. His body harrowed and hurting. He straightened. Abbas was tall. He looked more 11 than 8. Ahead of him the road was blocked. 2 Englishmen, dressed in civilian clothes, so not officials, were surrounded by an array of strange devices. A rod holding up what looked like a giant protractor, a measuring tape, and most interestingly for Abbas, a tripod on which was fixed some kind of telescope. The men were taking it in turns to look through the telescope contraption and observe something. Abbas so wished he could see through their machine. Maybe if he asked, he felt his face flush. He knew he never would. They were English, and he'd never spoken to an Englishman in his life. The younger of the 2 men, as tall, thought Abbas as 2 men put together, picked up the measuring tape and bending down began measuring the road. After a little while he returned to the man who was clearly in charge and said something. Abbas caught only a stray word or 2. The older man, with his thick ginger moustache and short beard that had gone awry, opened his notebook and began to write. The other man respectfully stepped back and waited. Looking up, he spied Abbas through pointy teeth, the sound of a whistle. The older man looked up, frowned. "That boy's watching us," said the younger. The older man turned to Abbas, stared. "What if," continued the younger. The older man cut him off. "To them it's all gobbledygook. Indians don't have a scientific bone in their bodies. Now be quiet while I finish this." And with that, his head bent again to his notebook. The younger man turned his back petulantly on Abbas. Leaning against a closed shop shutter, not too far away, someone else was watching the English officials. Abbas was now convinced that that's what they were. In his hand, the man clasped a long stick of sugar cane, which he bit into when he remembered, hardly chewing, spitting the debris out like a small mat of hay. When Abbas approached, the man looked at him with blood-veined, sleepy eyes. "Baisab," said Abbas. The man tugged at his lungi, tucking a loosened end of the cloth back at his waist. He then pulled himself up to honour the address. "Do you know what they're doing?" "Mapping," said the man. He held out his hand, offering Abbas a bite of his sugar cane. Abbas shook his head. He turned again to look at the 2 Englishmen. The younger was crouching, searching in his bag for something, his face full of confusion. Abbas turned to the sugar cane man. "Why?" he asked. The man bit his sugar cane, chewed, and spat to his other side. "Why?" asked Abbas again, thinking he hadn't been heard. The man laughed, a brave sound. "They're English," he said. The 2 Englishmen picked up their equipment and moved on. What are they mapping, Abbas thought, and why? So that's just the beginning. Sorry, I wrote the story first, and I know Nevish was asking about research, and I did the research. I mean, obviously I'm interested in Pakistani history, so things Aisha Jalal's work and other writers' work I was very familiar with.
Could I sort of interrupt you?
Hajiji, sorry.
Yeah. I just wanted to ask you, but for this, like, bits that you were doing, like the bricks, I mean, mapping and the other scenes in which, did you have to do any particular research at all, or was that all background?
No, so a lot of the things about partition, a lot of the things about partition, the history, things that you hear from your parents about what happened, things that I've read about. We were very lucky in our work that the kind of people who were around us, we grew up with Mubarak Ali, so we knew all these things. We were listening to these stories and reading about them as well. And I've always been, as I said, fascinated by history. So I wrote the story, and then later, and my Abbas, he begins to map the inside city. So that's what his exploration becomes about. And then I found out, I was reading a book, which is a brilliant book by Matthew Edney, about the mapping that took place in sort of the British mapping of not just Europe, not just India, but Africa and all the regions that. And the one place that they couldn't map was the inside city. They thought it was too messy. They tried to map it, and then they gave up. They said, there's no structure, we just can't go in here, and so that is one place that they just couldn't enter. So in my beginning, I have them trying to map the inside city. Abbas goes on to map the inside city for another reason, and then it's about his mapping and his confrontation with, he does it because he wants to find out about the city and make a record, but then it becomes as if he's almost a quasi-English person doing something, making a record, making this kind of analysis where we have historically a different kind of history.
There was another very interesting little bit of information which I wanted to get asked from you about the Lower Gate. You have a ways discovering the 13th gate of Lahore, and I just want to know a bit about that. I mean, it is supposed to be 13 gates. Is there any sort of historical background to this gate being there or being found at that particular part of history, or is it something a little bit of artistic license?
It is. I mean, Fawzia will know more about this than I do. But traditionally, in a lot of ancient civilizations across the world, it comes back from the Greek model. There are walled cities across the world. So in Jordan, obviously in Pakistan, and all these different places. And I thought usually these walled cities have 12 gates because of the connection with 12 and the zodiac, and 12 being a supernatural number. And I just thought it would be so interesting if you take the idea of 13, and does that bring, he discovers the 13th gate, it's made up gate, and as being something which brings bad luck into the city, and then they close it.
Now, I want you to read a bit about your partition, what pertains to especially the trains that, we all know about that, it's part of our psyche, the trains that went and came out laden with bodies. So she's written something about it, but it's not exactly the way we historically imagine it. It's a little bit different, and I just want you to read a short part of that.
So they've been, the family has gone to for a birth. They've gone for a birth that's happened in the family, and they're coming back on a train journey. Abbas has now begun to work for the railroad, and he thinks that it's safe to travel because he thinks, well, of course, I would know if it wasn't safe to travel. I thought I was
Coming back.
They're
47, right?
It's 1940. It's 1947, January 1947. So 3/4 of the journey had passed. Rashid was asleep, that's the mother. Leaning against the train's window, Hamid and Abbas, Hamid is Mariam's, the youngest daughter's husband, whose friendship this journey had cemented, hardly spoke a word. Their gaze was drawn again and again to Mariam and the baby. She glanced at Hamid. Abbas smiled, thinking it's made her shy. Having settled the baby down, Mariam fell asleep. Hamid too leaned back. Abbas turned to look out of the window. The smells, the feel of metal and of earth that changed as the seasons changed. Nothing was ever static in the world. Even stillness, he thought, was a charade, pretending to be what it never was. He frowned. Another village, another field. This one looked as if it had never been cultivated. Maybe the soil was acidic and unsuited to grow. But where were the people? Someone had to live here. It was inhospitable, true. But time could change anything. All that was required was a skilled pair of hands. But no, the hands had to know what to do. How long could you survive on luck and the mistake it yields? He saw 2 crows fly down and then swoop almost immediately up. They knew what he hadn't wanted to acknowledge. The land was dead. Fragments.
Harsh, cruel, but when brought together and seen as a composite whole, beautiful. Not because pain has been transcended, no. There is no golden gate through which we pass into a never-ending circle of light. Echoing. Why trust the light when we've trusted the dark and believed the shadows we have seen could, if we could only get close enough, be touched. Pain isn't to be transcended, not till the very end. If even then, it's to be born. He taught her she was beautiful, but now the old ideas bubbled up. Maybe her sharp lines were just that, sharp lines. Maybe her aunt had been right. For she jolted awake from her sleep. The piercing ringing of the bell cut the air, panicking the children who began to bawl and cry. She looked over at Manu, who was lying miraculously asleep in the comfort of Mariam's arms. Mariam's head was thrown back. She too was asleep, and Khurshid found her anger rising again. The train screeched to a halt, but the bell went pulsing on. What's wrong, said Khurshid. It's all right, Ami, Abez said. They've just stopped the train, that's all. She shook her head. Why? No one knew. Abez frowned, here in this wilderness, which appeared to be without beginning or end. Did someone want to get off or come aboard? Soon the complaints began. What are we doing stopping here? I have to get back. I'm going to be late. My son's getting married tomorrow. He can't get married without me. Probably some official wanting to see his aunt. Someone wanting to be. Look, Abez, said Hamid, pointing out of the window. Abez looked. People were descending from the train in throngs. Maybe there's some problem with the engine, Abez said. Look over there, said Hamid quietly. But before Abez could see what Hamid was pointing at, a young man, a gun gripped tightly in his hand, strode into their carriage. He was scruffily dressed, but his shoes, though old, were immaculately polished. He was hardly 20, thought Abez. He leaned against the bared and painless window frame and shouted, Idiot, turn it off. Within moments, the bell was switched off. He turned back to the passengers, smiling, then shouted, Get off the train. When no one moved, he cried, Now. There was a scramble for baggage. Leave it, he said. The passengers began to make for the doors. He laughed. Abez nudged Mariam. She woke. Khurshid noticed with a smile. More young men boarded their carriage. Like the first, they were all dressed in black shalwar kameezes, and they were all wielding guns. One, clearly the leader, a man who looked to be no more than 22 or 3, was the only one whose clothes were neatly pressed. He had a clean-shaven face and a sensuous lips. You can't make us get out. You can't, said a passenger with a perfectly round face and small disappearing eyes. One of the brigands came up to the man, looked at him for a moment, then spat in his face. The man sat down in his seat, bawling. Here, said a passenger urgently. He handed Abez his scarf, which was worn but thick. Put it on your sister's head. Mariam looked startled when Abez pulled that off, but she didn't say a word. As he tied the man's scarf around her head, he thought, she can pass just about for a boy. Khurshid's face was panic-stricken. Amma, said the passenger who'd given Abez his scarf, you'll be all right. Abez took the baby from Mariam's reluctant arms. Good, he thought, as it gurgled in its slumber. Stay asleep. They climbed out of the train together. Outside, the heat was searing through the sun, although the sun was beginning to sink in the sky. The passengers from the various carriages had, by some instinct, come together. Huddled as if under a tent, they waited. The smartly dressed young man who cleared the train now stood on its uppermost steps. Before he said a word, all eyes turned to him in fear. He planted his legs squarely and stroked his gun. You know what this is, he said. Some of the passengers bent their heads in submission. Like them, Abez had heard about these sorts of attacks, which were becoming daily more frequent. What government there was seemed lame in the face of them. But even if the government had had a better grip on security, what could it have done? The attacks were not coordinated or run by one mastermind. They were random, copycat acts, and therefore, said the police, impossible to control. Though the word on the street was that the police, as always, accepted their share of the booty. Abez couldn't look at Hamid. He thought the stories overblown, that he, as a railway man, would know if the railways weren't safe. Hamid's instincts had been right. Empty your pockets, your bags, shouted the leader. Some of the male passengers sighed with relief and urged their women to hand over their jewellery to 2 young men who were now passing through the crowd with sacks. That's all this was, a robbery. When money and gold were collected, the leader smiled and said, Men this side, women that.
Yeah, I mean, that was, I mean, the aftermath to that is quite quite stressful. But I mean, I won't divulge it. You'll have to read the book. It was beautifully written, and okay, a couple of other things that I wanted to ask you. So, in the blurb to the book, we get the feeling. Sorry. We get the feeling that Khurshid's like obsession is the main kind of engine which drives the characters and the plot forward. Now, when I personally read the book, I felt that this woman has an obsession, but she is a kind of a passive actor. She's the kind of person that everybody basically wants to avoid. And by the end of it, Wes wants to just quietly get rid of her. So, do you think, I mean, just asking you because, I mean, this is something to do with publishing perhaps or whatever. When it says that line that she is the one who changes their lives forever, do you think the way you've written the book that is true, or whether it's just a blurb which is kind of, which, I mean, I'm just saying it.
Yeah.
My observation.
No, that's true. I think the fault is mine. I wrote the blurb, so I can't blame the publishers for that. But I did it because I didn't want to give away too much. The story is a Versa story, and it's Mariam's story. But I didn't want to give away in the blurb too much of what was happening in the story about mapping and what he discovers. So we just put it in. It was strategic.
And also, I mean, for people who want to publish and who want to, we Aleph Review very sort of caught up with this process of editing, and we've had some young writers who've given us some brilliant things. But when we try to edit those things, they kind of they shy away from the process as if it's, somehow breaking them down. And I also know that Mr. Tawfiq Rafat, he was a great one for editing. I mean, for self-editing. He always believed that you should edit your work, that it cannot be, I mean, because it might be something that wakes you up maybe in the middle of the night and you get this inspiration to write something. But maybe in the cold light of day, I mean, the sentences that you've put down, the way you've written it, or after, if you come back to it after a little while, it doesn't sometimes happen to me. It doesn't look as good always. I mean, you feel that you need to perhaps change it a bit or whatever. So I just want to, I mean, for people out there who might be interested in publishing a book or whatever, did you self-edit quite a bit? Did your editors edit your book quite a bit? Did the people, publishers, did they make any suggestions that you had to change something eventually, or did they make any suggestions at all?
In the sense, I'm not a good editor. I tend to write first drafts, and just because I'm lazy, not because I think it's perfect or anything. But I was very, very lucky at the end. Before I gave it to, they have an editor. She was just saying things about continuity and what things followed and things should be in it. But that was all very, very useful. I was very lucky with my editor, but I was also very lucky with two friends. I have a Pakistani friend and an English friend, and they both ripped it apart and said, get rid of this. And this is because it was much longer. There was more about Balochistan. I loved Durban. I worked in Durban. Wanted to write about Durban. So there were lots of things that I really, really wanted to say, and they kept on saying it, and they were brutal. And they said, "This is just slowing things down." I think I was lucky in the sense that I wrote this, as I said, a long time ago, and only came back to it recently. But in the meantime, I've been writing plays, and that has been very helpful. I don't know if it's dramatic, but learning to push stories forward. I think before I was more interested in just the language. Is this nice? Does it sound nice? Blah blah blah. And now I'm like
if people say to me, oh, it's nice, we love the writing, it's like, okay, thank you, but what about the story? I really want it to be a good story, and I think writing drama has, I don't know whether it's taught me that, but it's helped me with that.
So I found that fascinating. I found it fascinating to talk to her, and I really do suggest that if you can buy the book, you should, because it's a very different book in the sense that it doesn't have that terrorism sort of Pakistan should be seen through this lens kind of vantage point. So I would really suggest you buy the book, and I would like Rashi also to say now something. By the way, should I say that I tell you the little story about how you know her quite well, but you okay.
Thank you, Mavish. First of all, welcome everyone to the Research and Publication Center. Our young friend introduced it to you briefly, so I won't go over that ground again. But basically, we should consider this not just a meeting place or a better, hopefully a watering hole, where we can meet to exchange ideas. This is something that is becoming more and more difficult in the public space in today's Pakistan. Either you're not allowed to, or if you are allowed to, you run some risks afterwards. That is the climate we live in. We thought there must be some place at least where people can, without, glancing over their shoulders, come together and exchange ideas. One of the things that is missing in today's Pakistan, I feel, is debate, discussion, dialogue. Everybody's shouting at each other, whether it's on the talk shows of television or in drawing rooms. Nobody has the patience to listen to each other and then maybe answer in a civilized way, So these are signs of a society in crisis, in my view. So if we can make some modest contribution to bringing down that temperature and getting everyone to have a civilized debate, I think that's the thing to do. Now, as to Anita, when Mavish came to me and said, we want to do this book launch, and the author is Anita Mir, some bells rang inside my head, but Urdu mein kehte na, jab satya jao to phir yaad kuch nahi rehta. I couldn't place her. I said, sounds very familiar. I think I know her. I'm scratching my head, I can't remember. And then she turns up the next day, and there's Anita Mir, with whom I worked together at Frontier Post all those many years ago. So she's a colleague, she's a friend. So all the memories came flooding back. Now I am at a disadvantage also, apart from Satyana, because I haven't read the book. I asked for it, I didn't get it. Complain. But anyway, we will get round to it, I'm sure. But I do want to say that this city, Lahore, I don't have to tell you Lahoris that. I'm just repeating what you know very well yourself. It has an ancient history and a very vibrant culture. वो पंजाबी में ऐसे नहीं कहते लाहौर लाहौर है. Everybody yearns for Lahore. Even the Sikhs, the Indian Punjabis, you name them. The world over, whenever you meet them, oh ji, Lahore, Lahore. So there is a rich vibrancy to our culture. And what I find interesting is that over the years, gradually, and particularly since 1997, when 50 years of independence was celebrated, in India in a larger quantity, but certainly also in Pakistan, there's been a lot of literature around partition and around our cultures and our ways of life and so on. And Lahore too has had its share of that. Not enough in my view. I think there's a lot more to explore. So if Anita's book has contributed something to that, I think it's a very welcome addition. Now, I do want to introduce very quickly one or two things that the center is contemplating doing. These are works in progress because there's another affliction, and that is that people come, make commitments, and then run away. So things get delayed. But we are setting up, as you can see, a hard library and an e-library to go with it. We are hoping to set up a mini TV station to do vlogs, which are short messages, 10 minutes. I hope that we can use this system very soon to show classic world cinema, to wean our youth away from Bollywood and Hollywood masala, which has fried our brains right now. let that be, if it's possible, the starting point of another dialogue at another level. Intellectual life in Pakistan is a threatened species. Excuse me. This is a research center. So many people came and said, हाँ हम आएंगे अपने research करनी है. एक नहीं आया.
हम टेबल
अब टेबल रखा है, लेकिन टेबल ही रखा है. Somebody has to occupy it. No, but seriously, I think this is the world we live in. Attention span has shrunk, and the ability to read books has declined, if not interest. I don't think our education system helps. I don't think social media helps, frankly. There's too much distraction. But those are the times we live in, we can't go against that. However, in whatever way possible, we must try and introduce some serious reading, research, writing, dialogue, discussion, debate. As I said, this is a society in crisis. I didn't want to say it, but I have to say it now. It's also a state in crisis. I'm not going to go into that. You all know it better than I do. But anyway, a state and society in crisis needs input, intellectual input, and it needs dialogue and debate. And so if we can make some effort in that direction, we're going to try our best to do it. I thank you so much. I thank Anita. I thank the Tawfiq Rafat Foundation, and particularly my friend Levish Amin, who is the moving spirit behind Alif Review.
Many other moving spirits.
In this, at the risk of nepotism, I might add the latest issue carries an interview of mine. So do read it.
Yes.
Now I will close by thanking all of you and inviting you for a cup of tea and chat informally. Thank you.